Okay, for me, it's the vocals are very important. Okay, and after that, it's the drums and bass. Man. I'm a bass player, so I will have to say that. No, but for me, it's like more like all the songs that I mean, artists that I like, or all the songs that are even though I didn't realize initially, they all have phenomenal bass lines. In fact, if you take any of the really amazing songs that have been out there, like they say 24K Magic or what's that Dua Lipa song, Levitating, like that's kick-ass bass lines, man. Like all the songs, like I think if Michael Jackson's Thriller album is like a study of amazing bass lines, right? So all these it's like it's the bass and drums and the vocal that I like that combination. They need to like really like that's where the energy is. Guitars and stuff are just for fancy. No, but I do like. Sorry, are you a guitar player? Guitar. Yeah, but yeah, for me, those are the main things. Guitar is actually more of like a compliment. Like a lot of people think, oh, the bass is complimenting. I'm like, nah, the bass needs to be sent out. So I like working and I like working in that direction. So yeah, the guitars and I like strings. I mean, I've lately been doing a lot of orchestral stuff, so it's like I enjoy like textures because we are so used to guitars, bass, drums, and the sound of it. But you know, writing for woodwinds, the texture you get on woodwinds are phenomenal. Like we don't really explore that how cellos, no, what am I saying? The oboes and clarinets and all these guys can be layered to create beautiful textures. So, but if I had to choose vocals, bass, and drums, man, I can write an entire song with that. Through the guitar song. Anything else? Anything? You guys can ask me questions on anything. No?
And so what about the instrumental track?
Sorry?
Without vocal, what about instrumental track? Like Polyphia, Pliny,
Yeah.
everything, interval, what about without vocal? Which one is more like important?
See, it's all melodies, dude. The reason why you listen to Pliny and Polyphia is the melodies stick in your head, right? Are you able to hum the fast parts? No, but you'll be able to hum the slower parts easier. Correct? Yeah, that's the thing. So, yeah, so I think some of your nerds can hum it, but most like can't, right? Yeah, I mean there are dream theaters like this. Like I know, Change of Seasons. I know it. I can hum every part of the song inside out. But you know that's just me. Sorry, Cancer Bitter, yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's the thing. But when you listen to the reason why those guitars, because they write beautiful like melodies on the guitar, right? Very beautiful melodies on the guitar, and then it's all embellished with all the technical stuff in it. But the focus is on the melody. If you don't have that, see what is improvisation or what does it mean though when you have a track? Say you have a theme and then you're going to improvise. You're going to play some lines over it, right? You're going to play some melody. So improvisation actually comes because you need to have a melody to improvise on. So you have a theme and then you improvise on it. So those guitarists do that. They have a certain theme and they improvise over that theme. So the writing is important in that instrumental music. I mean, you can listen to Steve Vai also, dude. He's a beautiful guitar. Right? He writes phenomenal melodies on the guitar. So, anything else? I thought you guys will ask me some hardcore questions.
So, do you have examples of compositional mistakes that you have done?
Every song, dude. My whole life is a compositional mistake.
Do you have some good examples of something that you have found through trial and error?
Compositional mistakes?
Compositional, just techniques or methods, or something that you found out through just practice and trial and error.
I mean, I can show you some on the guitar, I might as well use it. So one of the, I can quickly go through some, especially when it comes to chords, you know. So you guys know how chords work, right? So this is a scale. You guys know scales, right? Okay, let me just break this down for you. You guys know some amount of music theory, right? A little bit notes and stuff. What's the fifth of C? What's the fifth of G? Fifth of D? Fifth of A? E. It's like a circle, right? You know, it's part of the circle. Okay. Now let's just take the first 5 notes. Okay, that is C, G, D, A, E. Okay. Just rearrange them alphabetically. What do you get? Starting from C. Here C, D, E, G, A, and C. That's what's scale. You guys know what scale that is? What scale is this? It's a major pentatonic scale. Right? So you get the major pentatonic from that way. They've taken the first few fifths. It's a very natural thing, right? It's in nature of the fifths. If you guys know your overtone series, you guys know your harmonic and overtone series and stuff. So it's like the fifth is in. It's. I mean, I wanted to go into it. Maybe probably after this. Okay. See. So this is a string, right? You see a string on the screen? Okay. So you know string vibrates like this, correct? Okay. Now that's not actually what happens on stringed instruments. Okay. So if you want to actually vibrate exactly like what is shown here, you have to initially set the string to that. Can I do it? No. I can't set it to this curve and then let it vibrate. So what happens is mostly a little like. Oops. So I have a string, right? And you kind of pick this point, right? This is fixed. Right? You kind of pick this point, you create a little kink, right? And then you let it loose. So what happens when you set up that wave? I mean, set up that string is you set up this little waveform here, right? This one goes all the way here and then flips direction, right? You guys understand this?
Yeah.
Now, what happens when this wave comes back is it interacts with this wave, correct? Is it clear? And then, so what happens is like it's pulling down and it's going up. It's going to eat into this, and then in the end you get this complex, very weird stuff that's happening all the time. So when you strike the string, it's not as simple as the string going up and down. There's also the stuff going on inside. Is it clear? Now, nature doesn't like that. It's like the energy is just moving. It's just taking too much energy. So it wants to find places where it can stabilize, right? So it'll find a spot where it doesn't have to move sideways and just move up and down. That's it. So that's when you get this little first thing. So that's called the fundamental note, right? You understand this? Is this clear? Any doubts? So that's called a standing wave. And if you take a guitar, it's pretty much the same thing. You have not on the bridge, and it's to pull the string here, creating this little ringing, right? Is this cool? Right? Now the string will also find another place where it can get standing waves. So it'll find these things called nodes, right? The node is so that's a fundamental. Now let's just assume for ease, just for ease that's a 100 hertz vibration. The length of the string is L. This is 100 hertz. Okay, it's not 100. It's a 41 point something, but it's 100 for now. Okay. This is a drop. Now the string will also tend to find a node. Another node where it can vibrate up and down. So this is the next possible place where it can move up and down. So that's on your 12th fret. Okay? You got it? That's on your 12th fret. So when I touch the 12th fret, not press it, so I get this harmonic, right? So that's exactly where it's dividing the string into two parts. You got it? And play here, you get a harmonic again. See? Octave. Understand this? So basically what it's saying is, if I cut the string to half and then measure the interval between this big string and the small string, I'm going to get an octave interval. Right? Is this clear? Right? So that's the second harmonic or the first overtone. So the 12th fret, and since the length of the string is in half, you know length and frequency are inverse to each other, right? Length is half, the frequency is double. It's 200 hertz now. So and that's what defines an octave, a 2:1 frequency. So imagine you have a metal rod, you strike it, you get a sound, and then you cut it exactly in half, you get another sound, and it's going to be roughly an octave. Is this clear?
Yeah.
Any doubts? You guys have any doubts then? No? Moving on. The string will also find these other notes where it's equally divided in three parts. So that's somewhere around the 7th fret, right? So, see this? very hard to do, but it's dividing the string into 3 equal parts, basically. You understand? So this interval that you get is a fifth above the first octave. So I had the open string, I had the octave, first overtone, and I have a fifth above it. Right? So in this case I have E, higher E, then this B above the first octave. But the string will also find a way to create standing waves when it's split in 4. You can split the string into 4 now. So that's your fifth string, basically.
Trying to find.
Take another higher octave. Get it? Yeah, right. Yeah, right. The string is divided into 4 equal parts, basically. You got it? So,
No, there's just one piece.
yeah. You got it? You guys understand this? Next. Now the string will also find a way to divide itself into 5 equal parts. You guys got it? So that's roughly around your 4th fret. Sorry. See, I can get the harmonic here. 1, 2, somewhere around here. 3, 4. The fifth one will be here or something. Inside it. Right? So the string is being divided into 5 equal parts, right? And when that happens, you get a third above the second octave. So you have the open string fundamental, the first octave, the fifth above the first octave, the second octave, the third above the second octave. So you see, the major scale is what is the major chord? 1, 3, 5, right? It's not random, it's in nature. See, that's the first few ones that you get. It's not random at all. So that's why the music theory stuff is not random. It's like this, it's evolution and it's all those things that's giving the results, right? I can keep going higher. That's the last harmonic. Now the string is doing the 6 parts, and it's roughly around the 3rd fret. And this goes on to infinity. Actually, it's just goes on to infinity. So any note that you play. Now you've got to understand, these things are happening simultaneously, not... So when I play an open string here, you can hear the harmonics. You guys hear it? Yeah. So that's why when you put an, you know what an equalizer is, right? When you put an analyzer, a spectrum analyzer, FFT analyzer, and you see, when you play one note, you're going to see different spikes. So what is that showing you? It's actually showing you all the different harmonics in it. You understand? So, these individual waves, they're actually like pure sine waves, basically. Okay? Now, pure sine waves don't exist in nature. Like, nothing can produce pure sine waves. But anything that you hear is actually a combination of all these. So, what happens when you throw like a completed, like master track into a DAW and really open it up? You're going to see just one waveform, right? Or 2 waveforms if it's stereo, obviously. But it's just, how is that? Have you ever thought that how is that all the instruments are like finally landing up and becoming this just one stereo waveform? Because everything's so that waveform is actually like it's a cumulative addition of the drums, bass, guitars, and everything in it. So it's like the harmonic series basically. It's like now harmonics are making up the note. The song is made up of all these individual waveforms added up together. Right? So you guys have any questions on this harmonic series, because it's very, very important. You guys know what a sine wave is, right? Music, right? And suddenly I'm going to hit an F. What happens? Feels like the music stepped out. See that? It's not sitting, it's not. You want to come back. Stepping out. Coming back home, but now when I hit the B, it's not right. It's like it's like, oh no, I need to move up. See that the B wants to go to a C, and the F wants to go to an E. And these are the half steps in the whole major scale. Do you understand? So the half steps is what creates tension, right? So when I play the B, I go to the B wants to go to C, F wants to go to E. When I play them both together, so that's That's a big part of music, which is a 5 to 1. That's a 5 chord. It's like your staple of music. It's part of music. The 5 to 1 is important. That's what creates tension and resolution. That's a very important composition. Now you know that, like this, like C, G always goes to C. And you know that there are chords in certain keys, right? You have C major, in C major you have C major, D minor, E minor. Sorry, C. These are the chords. Now imagine that you can use these are called secondary dominants. So this is one of the composition tricks I like using, which is like starting with C, but before I get to D, I throw in the 5 of the D. That's a composition trick, right? So yeah, I have a list of all this stuff, but I don't think I can cover a lot of this stuff.
So you guys have any other?
Yeah, any other questions do you guys have?
Share this with us.
Yeah, it's on this guy's computer. What's the site that you just take it? He saved the workshop, good. So I have all this stuff like going on, but you guys can take the sheet presentation and send it. Yeah, so these are some of the harmonic tools that you can use to like there's a bunch of the list of things that sorry? Yeah, it's on this guy's computer, please like dude you publish it. Go on torrents or whatever. Okay, so these are some of the compositional tricks that I keep using. A lot of stuff, you know, conversion, secondary dominance, 251, backtracking, passing dominance, modulation. Your Radiohead fan, borrowed chords, very, very important. Loose progressions, counterpoint. So these are like some of the composition techniques I use. It's going to take me a month to get into any of these things. So please screenshot or you can take the presentation from him. But yeah, you can keep the presentation. Just go through the topics one by one. Yeah, because I've written it in a specific order. Right? Cool. Any questions, guys? So we'll just wrap this up. Never spoken so much in my life.
So what is modulation?
Modulation is when you're moving to a different key. Suppose I'm starting C major, you know C major chords. Now you have modulation. You got it? So that's modulation. Modulation is when you step out of the key just for 1 or 2% and come back down.
So you play live as well?
Huh?
You play live as
Yes, quite a bit. Any questions? Guys, anything?
So this question is not related to music.
Dude, listen, you guys can ask me anything. Okay? Nothing to do with music.
What would you do if you want to go to a recording engineer or mixing engineer?
Sorry?
What would you do from the recording engineer or mixing engineer if you want to go both like?
If you want to hire somebody,
Yeah.
mixing engineer,
Both things.
recording engineer, like if you want to be a good recording engineer, it's like I would expect him to know how the studio works. Because when I go to the studio, he needs to know how the room works. He needs to know what mic can be used for which instruments. Just a good understanding of the environment that he works in, that's pretty much it. Right, a mixing engineer, it's like, I mean, I've never really sent songs to get it mixed by somebody else, but I don't know. I do stuff by my own. But if I had to send it to an engineer, I don't know, man. I'm just too anal about these things, so very hard for me to. Yeah, so you had a question?
You just mentioned that you produce and mix and master your tracks.
Mastering, I try to avoid too, because I don't think mastering should be mixing and mastering should be done by the same guy. That's at least my philosophy. I don't do it.
Yeah, so for an artist like me, I write my songs, produce my songs, mix and master, top to bottom, everything.
Okay.
But sometimes when I look back at the songs, I feel like, oh shit, this could have been better, that could have been better if it was given to somebody else, because I'm hearing it continuously on a loop.
Yeah.
I'm not able to, what do you say, find out the mistakes in some parts. So how do you overcome that?
Get a producer.
No, if I want to do it myself.
See, you can't do it yourself, and then it's like, I have a secondary opinion. Like, you get a producer to fix these issues. That's the reason why the producers have jobs, because you can't do it yourself. I have a job because other people. You know what I'm saying? So you can't. See, you can't be like, I'm going to do everything myself and expect it to become a great product. No, you got to listen to what other people also have to say. And you have to work with someone who really knows the shit. You can't just go to some producer down there, because here if you throw two stones, you'll find three producers. It's like that nowadays. So you'll find you need to go with someone who has experience in producing the stuff, not just calling themselves a producer. So when I say good producer, they need to know the theory first of all. They need to have experience. They need to have experience working in different styles and things like that. So, and someone who can look at the music objectively and point out issues that can be corrected, not just be like, I'm not feeling this line, it's not working for me. Like, say, this guy should be able to point out and say that, have a technical reason as to why it's not working. That's
Also suggest something better.
definitely, that's part of the thing. I mean, if you know why it's not working, you should know. You can say something that you can offer suggestions that will work. Right? So producers, see nowadays, I meet kids a lot. My friend is producing the album. It's like your friend is not an expert in production. He might know how to use a DAW. That doesn't make him a producer, because anybody can download a fake version of Ableton these days. It's very easy. No, but being a producer takes a lot of skill, dude. Why are you looking down?
So how do you start out as a
How do I start it? Okay. Okay, this is an interesting thing, because I started out by helping my friends actually. And I told them, listen, my production is going to be complete crap, but I'll do it for free. Sure. So I started out by helping my friends, and they also trusted me. So you have to develop trust with your friends. And like, because my friends, we all end up listening to the same kind of music, so they knew that I'll eventually figure it out. So they had this trust, but I enjoy working with my friends a lot more than working in the studio with professional musicians, because it's a little more not comfortable. It's more like it's fun. It's pure fun, dude. But if you want to start out, you pick up any project, dude. You pick up any project, and don't think about this whole thing of how do I monetize myself immediately after getting out of college, because it's not going to happen. Why will someone pay you money? Because I don't even know you. So you have to gain experience. The first couple of years, well, for me now, it's like I'm in the mistake-making period of my production. So it's like I'm experimenting, I'm trying all sorts of things, but take a project where they give you freedom to experiment, right? And take up projects where where time is not like a deadline thing, right? Where they'll be like, you're not under the force. They're like, okay, fine, you experiment, you figure it out, you figure out ways to work with people like that. It's all about finding good people to work with. And do it. I mean, if you have to do it for free, do it. It's fine. Like, I really wasn't too concerned about money when I started out. I just wanted to really improve my craft. That takes time. Anything else?
Guys, any other questions?
So how would you approach?
No, I get.
How would you approach a percussion section without the drums? Like there's no drums and you have to like have percussion in the song. So
I'll go first find a book on percussion. If it's Latin percussion, I'll find a book on Latin percussion. There are plenty. I have some at home also. I'll learn the vocabulary first, figure out what's happening. then see, first of all, see if that can be applied to the song. Because everybody wants to have strings and percussion sections and all that, but does it work? Does that groove work for it? You know? Okay, then if it's passed the little test, then I would read more about it and try to listen to some of music. Like say if you're going to do like Cuban percussion or something like that, I'd actually spend like a week just listening to Cuban percussion, understanding, writing it down, and then implementing it in the song. So that's how I would do it. I would never start out with, I'm just going to make Cuban percussion. That's not the way I work. So I have to study the music first before I apply it. Right. See, anything, that's a cool thing about theory, dude. You can just work in once you know the basics, you can just absorb information from different genres. Because technically it's the same. So these are not like rules written by humans, but it's all, some of this stuff is like very it's based from evolution and all that stuff. So you can apply it and you can figure out, okay, I'm listening to this genre and I need to learn the nuances of the genre before I apply it. Right? Anything else? And finally, mastering. So you guys know what mastering is? What is mastering? No, that's not the answer. Sorry, I just get it.
Making the song sound good and mixing the
that side you can go and shoot from there.
That's the answer, not loudness. Not necessarily. So, see, mastering comes from, basically it's an old term that they use, you know. Do you know where the word mastering comes from? No?
some pagan thing.
Pagan thing. Sorry, bro. Not pagan. See, basically, back in the day, when bands, if you know your recording history, it's very important to know recording history because you learn where all the stuff comes from. So back in the day, in places like say Abbey Road, for example, right? So bands used to record to tape, and then the tape used to go to the mastering. So what happens in mastering is it's kind of being cut into a metal disc. So that disc was called a master disc. All right. So that's the person who cut that music into the disc was called the mastering engineer because he cuts the master disc, and that's where the term cutting a record also comes from. Right. That's why they cutting a record. So the master disc is kind of like that's a copy of that is kind of sent to all your vinyl pressing factories basically. So that's where mastering comes from, and that process of mastering is actually like so if you have you guys seen vinyl records? Right. So if you have too much bass, what happens? The groove cuts a little deeper, which means if you have too much bass, it's gonna eat into the next concentric groove. Right? So these guys had to do all sorts of EQ and all that stuff to make sure that it doesn't have too much bass. And so basically mastering comes from that aspect of trying to fit your song for that specific format. So that's why you have different tape mastering, vinyl mastering, you have mastering for Spotify and all that stuff. So it's basically to make your songs, the playback of the song should be at an optimal level in different formats. So when bands release music, especially the big artists, they sometimes have it in different formats, and they sound different, obviously, because there's vinyl format, there's CD format, there's Spotify, and all of them have their own little flavor and character, right? So mastering is not generally to make it loud, dude. So that's and loudness is I can go on rant about that for days, but let's leave it at that. Okay. Now, part of the process is also this project management stuff. That's because a lot of people think production is just sitting at the console and just pushing faders, looking cool and taking selfies and stuff like that. But no, this is the donkey work that you need to do before any of that, which is you need to rehearse, you need to figure out logistics. You got to figure. So if you don't have a certain drum kit, you have to find out people who have it, get it from them, beg and borrow, and steal pedals if you have to get your project done. And a lot of work is also about cost optimization, right? So because a lot of times client will come and tell you that the general thing, right? It's like they want this, but they have only so much. So you have to find a middle ground and trying to figure out that okay, fine, this is the budget, and this is what you can do with your budget. So that's very important. It's the donkey work part that you have to learn, right? And then you have commercials and contracts, and if you're working with session musicians, make sure that you have things on paper, man, things on email, and make sure that if you're promising session musician a certain fee, make sure that you send it in emails. Make sure that you have paperwork for everything, right? Whether or not using code is a different thing, but at least as a commas have that in email writing. And legal things, especially if you're like doing hip hop stuff, you want to sample stuff, right? But you want to upload it onto, say, like Spotify. It's not going to be easy to distribute music that's you can't just steal a sample and put it. So you need to go through some legal channels to acquire the rights to use the sample. So that's very important, right? Especially for guys who are into pop. Okay, next. Okay, so this is a big mantra. Okay, so good writing plus bare minimum production equals a good song. Right, so this is the basic thing. So if your song sucks, you can send it to Abbey Road. You can get David Gilmour to play a solo on it, and nobody still they're not going to listen to it, man. Right, because it's not hitting the listener. Right, so it's important to yeah. So it's important to have writing like sorted out at the fundamental basic level. Okay, is that clear? Is that understood? Just remember this, huh? It's going to help you later on in life. Okay, yeah. So identify issues and fix the song before you produce it. So like I said before, if the song doesn't have certain elements, you can't really produce it because there's nothing to produce in there. Cool. So moving on. Okay. So why learning music theory is extremely beneficial? Anybody?
Because the mind is preconditioned to listen in a certain way, like a particular arrangement. So if you don't stick to that, it might sound uneasy, but for new minds who are into experimentation, it might appeal. But majority of it without music theory, I think to address the masses, it might be a problem.
Okay. Anything else?
Just more tools at my hand as a producer.
Sorry?
Learning music theory is like more tools at my
Exactly.
disposal.
Any other reasons?
Might save on some donkey work.
Sorry?
Might end up saving on some donkey
A lot of donkey work.
Just learning like why something sounds good will like help in some long run.
Okay. Okay. So I've written down some reasons that we'll just go through. See, first thing is it's an essential part of the craft, man. Because if you call yourself a producer, you need to know music. You know what I'm saying? So you can't like say I'm going to just learn plugins and DAWs and not know music theory. It's like an architect telling that I just want to draw lines but not actually learn geometry. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like how is that even possible? So if you want to be a good producer, you have to be really competent in music theory. Trust me. The next I have is so it's extremely powerful in combination with implicit learning. So when I say there are two kinds of learning things, there's implicit learning and explicit. So explicit is what this music theory stuff, the formal education. So when I say implicit, it means things that you learn from experience, right? And most producers that I've seen, they always have this thing of, I'm just going to learn it by listening. I'll figure it out by feel and intuition and all that. It's great. You need to do that also. But in combination with learning music formally, it becomes really powerful. And after a while, you notice that it's kind of merging. It's one and the same. It's not really. It's not really two different things. Right? Any questions?
Like, do you mean, like, in a sense, like the knowledge that we have 440 hours, 440? So they say if you have music close to it. I'm not very sure on this.
Okay.
So I just saw it.
No. When I say explicit learning, it means the music theory in general, like how chords work, how melodies work, how harmony works and things like that. So it's you need to have good understanding of music theory because it's applied everywhere, right? It's a tool that you can extract a lot of information from. Okay. It's a fantastic tool for music analysis and simplification. So here's the thing. So when you learn music theory and start applying it in songs, you'll notice that at some point you will be able to like simplify. You do these math equations, right? Where you simplify. Remember in school, right? So every song is actually based on some really simple concepts, actually. But the thing is, the creativity that actually goes into the song is trying to expand on that simple thing and making it look more vibrant and very textural. But a lot of complicated songs, right? Even if you take your like Dream Theater or anything, you can actually break it down into something simple if you know your theory, right? And start looking at it from a very basic perspective, kind of first principle perspective, right? So it's a tool. It's a kind of tool that it's like breaking down the engine and looking into it. Okay, this is what's happening in the car, right? And then obviously you'll learn some insight into how music works if you do that. Okay, it's quicker and smarter musical solutions, obviously. So, when you're working with the artists, it's like, you'll find artists who are stuck with this, oh, I don't know what to do from this section to this section, and instead of, if you know these tools, it's easy to come up with not just one idea, but multiple ideas, and that you can just test it out really quickly. So, let's try this combination. Does it work? No, let's move on. What about this? Oh, maybe we'll try another one. Oh, that works. Let's keep it. So you build this. It's kind of like this toolbox that you have handy. It's right there, and you can just churn out multiple ideas, right? So it's quicker, it's faster, and gives you it's way smarter to approach it this way rather than experiment and like trial and error by just going through what people say feel. Okay, and this is very important. So, most of us are used to hearing. So when I say different compositional techniques, we know the general thing about like chords and keys and all these things, right? So, but there are some cool experimental techniques that you can use to add some flavor to your composition. So you won't be able to understand it if you don't know basic theory. Right? You can't use these complex concepts if you don't understand how basic theory works. So, and there are lots of very cool, weird compositional techniques, 12 tone, and you would have heard all this stuff like negative harmony and things like that. So those are like different tools that you have, but it's going to be difficult for you to apply that if you don't have a good understanding of the basics, right? So again, so this is like just a step to understanding the bigger, the more complicated techniques. Okay, this is very important. Diverse work opportunities. I messed up the order. Diverse work opportunities. So, see, the reality of the situation is when you get into this kind of work, you're going to get work from different areas, right? So, I do work. I work on games. I work on jingles. I work in a band. Then somebody will ask me to do something else, some Hindi song. I'm gonna ask for jazz. It's like, but when you're starting off, you can't really say that, no, this is my style, I'm going to do only this. You're pretty screwed if you do that, really, in a career pathway, right? You can't. You have to be able to work in different genres of music, right? And learning theory will help you understand how these genres of music work, because every genre has specific movements of chords, they have certain rhythms, and and also when I give you something new, you'll be able to analyze it really quickly. So if I give you, say, an Irish folk song, for example, right? So that's weird, right? So none of us have experience making Irish folk songs, right? But then when you break it into, when you listen to it, you'll be able to like, okay, this is the chord, this is the standard chords kind of the chord scheme that they use. Okay, the melody is going up and going down. So you develop these analytical tools to pick up at any genre of music. So that way, it's the music theory tool is very helpful. Okay, building proficiency on at least one polyphonic. So when I say polyphonic, it either means guitar or keyboard for us, unless anybody owns a harp or something. But you need to see. It's going to be hard for you to produce if you're not proficient in at least one instrument. When I say proficient, it means like you should be able to play it to a decent level, Like your chords, especially chords, are very important. I'm not talking about shredding on the guitar or something. Whatever simple melodies or basic melodies or chords, you should be able to express it easily. So if you are getting into production and if you don't know an instrument, if you don't know how to play an instrument, you're going to find it very difficult. So for guys who don't know that, either learn the guitar or I would say learn the piano, because obviously it's like one note. So keep in mind. Right. So the music theory also is about like learning all the rules before you break them, right? And that's obvious, right? So you can't. A lot of what happens is we think we're doing cool stuff, but it's not exactly cool. It's already been done before. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, so when you learn when you learn the theory stuff, you'll know like, oh, this is the standard stuff, okay? And then you know like which way to go to break them, right? Because you need to know the rules before you break it, because otherwise it's just random stuff going on. So yeah, know the rules before you break them. Okay, and this is important. Okay, So the music theory is not just somebody just didn't wake up one day and be like, okay, fine, this works like that. It's actually based on like years of evolution and research, right? And when somebody has done all that work for you and is presenting the data to you in a very concise format, why would you reject it, right? So there are things that you can learn implicitly, which is like through experience and all that. But when someone's actually done the work for you, it becomes easier for you to like grasp that concept a little faster than you than it would if you had to do it by trial and error, right? Because I did it through trial and error and a lot of things, and then I went into the theory. So then I figured, oh shit, it's like so simple, man. Like why did I spend like 3 years learning this concept that I know I could have learned in like 3 days? So it's like that, you have to you have to know that there's a lot of people who did a lot of things to make sure that we can understand it better. So absorb it. Cool. Now how to learn? So this is a question I get. Okay, so I know that you're like, how do I actually like make this a part of my how does it become natural for me to do it, right? So first thing is listening to music. How many of you guys listen to music, right? You guys, because that's a hard thing nowadays to ask people, right? So how many of you guys listen to albums, full albums? How many of you guys enjoy like Spotify playlists and stuff? Yeah, okay. See, listening, it's like eating. You know what they say. You are what you eat, right? It's the same thing. Music, you are what you listen to. It's self-explanatory. It's like the music you listen to, when you drown in the music you listen to, you kind of like absorb it unconsciously sometimes. Because if you're say you're listening to jazz or whatever, you listen to more of jazz, like your mind knows subconsciously that it's like some things that happens in jazz. Struggle.
Jazz was like
Sorry?
Music you make is basically all the songs you've ever heard.
Exactly. That's precisely it. So it's like that's what's going into your head, right? And that's what's gonna come out. So listening is a big part of it. And so when I say listening, I'm really talking about critical listening. Okay, it's just not putting a song and then like putting some, lo-fi hip hop and doing some other homework. That's not listening. It's you have to like really spend time listening to music. Set up. I don't know if you guys like. So when I was like a couple of years younger and all that, like my friends and I used to gather in our homes and we used to just listen to music together, man. It's a beautiful thing. Just listen to full albums together, and talk about it. And it's important to develop critical listening skills. It's just not about just putting it on and just leaving it there, or just listening in the car when you're driving your mind to something else. So critical listening is different from just normal hearing a song. Okay, so that's the first step. Without listening, you can't do anything. Next, transcribe and learn to play the song. Right. So this is where it gets a little bit more intense, because if there's a song that you like, figure out what's going on with the transcript. Learn to play. Just learn to play the song. Right. If it's say Nirvana song, just learn to play the Nirvana song. Right. Don't worry about it. Just play. You can figure it out later what's exactly happening. And this goes for any genre of music, not just rock, jazz, or whatever. Next, analyze and break down what's happening. So this is where your theoretical tools come into play. Right. So without these theoretical tools, you won't be able to break down the song, and you won't know what. Okay, it's in this key. So especially when you listen to like cool music, like Beatles and Radiohead, and it's very, very, very intricate what's happening harmonically, right? So it's like you won't be able to figure out what's going on in the song if you don't have these tools. Or you might just get a bunch of chords and be like, okay, fine, why did it go to this chord? I don't know why it went to this chord. So, but then if you have these theoretical tools, it can explain a lot of things, why it goes to this chord, why it goes to that. Or it might tell you that it makes complete, it doesn't make any sense at all, which means that, oh, but that's a very interesting thing. So he's actually broken a rule. So it gives you all these insights into a song. Now test and apply the new information. So basically it's like, so let's say you take a song, you've broken it down, and there's this cool little progression that you liked, and what do you do with that? You use it in your song. Simple. You take that idea, you use it in your song, right? And this is where the creativity stuff comes in, right? This is the actual part of the music creativity part. It's like, how do you use that idea into your song? That's the actual creativity part, right? Because, you know, when you steal a car, you don't just steal a car and drive it around. You have to give it a fresh coat of paint, change the license plate, and you know what I'm saying? So, you have to be a little creative with that stuff. So you're not really stealing the music, but you're taking the idea, right? So it's important that you take the idea, but then use it in your own way, and that's what creativity is. What do you bring into the game, right? Because we know that that's a technique used by Nirvana, Radiohead, or whatever. How are you using this? What are you doing with this? That's the creative part. Okay. Then what happens after that? You add that, it becomes a part of your vocabulary, and that's how it becomes. It becomes like second nature. Like, you know, there are certain techniques that become very second nature to you, right? And it's like driving a bike. After a while, you get used to it, right? You start using these harmonic tools everywhere. Got it? And how do you practice this? This is the best way to do it, man. It's teaching. You teach. You get better at the stuff by also teaching, by explaining this concept to other people, and that is what's helped me a lot to remember like some really complicated stuff, because I teach almost every day. So it's when you teach, you're also explaining this to a lot of people. So, and then you find like holes in the argument that you have, or in the understanding of the music. So make it a point to explain it, to teach people. You know, teach for free. You know, do something like that. All right. You guys have any questions? Nothing?
What did you teach?
Sorry?
What did you teach?
What do I teach? I teach production bass, whatever. Okay, money, no, but yeah, I mean, music theory, production, I teach bass, guitars, and a lot of audio engineering and sound engineering principles also. Any other questions? Anything else? Nothing? Okay. Okay, so these are some filters that I use. Okay, so now we're kind of zoning into some specific things. Okay, so some of the filters that I use to analyze, say, in production is, so let's take a simple sound, for example. Just take a tom. You know what a tom is, right? A drum kit tom. Okay, so I hit the tom. Okay, it's got a bunch of characteristics. Can you tell me what those characteristics are? Like, what are the different like characteristics of a tom drum?
Attack.
Great. Then anything else?
Tonal characteristic.
Sorry.
Tonal characteristic.
Okay. Anything else?
Decreasing pitch.
Decreasing pitch. Great. Then anything else? Sorry.
Rhythmic characteristic.
No, just one hit. Just one hit. Sorry. That's a good one. Resonance. Then
Prominent in the mid region of the frequency.
overtones. Okay. Then
Its relationship with other toms.
let's just take one tom for now. I'm bored. I'm just hitting on one tom. Anything else? Okay. Cool. So basically, so when I take any sound, for example, it could be a tom, it could be a hi-hat, it could be one single guitar note or one single bass string. So it's got these bunch of characteristics. One is one is loudness, right? The loudness of the tom, right? How hard I'm hitting it, right? The energy, the intensity, all these things. So that's one aspect of it, right? Now, when I say loudness, it doesn't mean like pushing the fader of loudness, right? It means like physically hitting it. That's how much pressure of air that's putting out, right? Because I've seen like a lot of times I've seen it, like, you know, people record guitars, but they say it should be soft, so they lower the volumes down in the faders, That's different from playing soft. You understand? It's got different characteristics than playing soft. Right? So playing soft and turning the volume down is two different things. So the tom will have some dynamic information, right? The next one, the duration of the envelope, like I said, attack, right? So that's the attack, like how hard, like the initial. You know what attack is, right? You guys know what envelope is. So there's initial spike in the level. So that's the duration, right? So you guys know what attack, decay, sustain, release is. Yeah, fantastic. Okay. Now, frequency and pitch. The tom also has a pitch, right? Do you guys like know how to tune toms and all that? Do you guys sort of? Okay. So that's something which I do a lot, which I love tuning drum kits. I chase everybody out and just sit with the trumpet. Kind of meditative in a way, right? It's nice. So the drum kit, even your tom has fundamental note. Even the drum kit has fundamentals and overtones, and it's a little more complicated than a single string because it's a membrane, right? It's a 2D membrane, it's a little more complicated, but it does have a fundamental note. It does have overtones, and then if you put a ring on it, you know what a ring is? Put a O-ring, it will dampen some of the higher overtones, and depending on your the thickness of the drum head, you know, you might get different different say sequence of overtones.
So
Right?
what's that gel called? It's based in
I think it's called Moon Gel. Moon Gel. Yeah, Moon Gel is a brand, but it's just I usually use paper, man. Cotton now. Yeah, gels work. You gotta place it in specific spots. But then that's more of fine-tuned control of it. I think it depends on so when I work with drums, it's okay. Sorry. So yeah, the drums. So it depends on what you're trying to record. What you're trying to control. If you want a drum kit, if you want a tom with a lot more sustain, then you don't have to use that. If you want, it's mostly to kill the sustain and to control the overtones. That's what you use. Okay, next, moving on. The tempo, the tone, or the texture, right? So this is where the overtones come in, because the overtones is kind of what defines the tempo, the tone, and the texture. It's actually you guys know what timbre actually is? What is it? Guys, timbre. Sorry?
Yeah, it defines the instrument.
What defines instrument?
It's like the quality of the sound.
See, yeah, so timbre is actually a combination of both the overtones and the envelope. That's what gives you timbre, right? And you know what compressors are, right? Right, so you know what compressors actually do? They are the main intention of compressors is actually to change the timbre of the instrument, which means the attack and the overtones, right? It's not just about getting the levels right. So that's an added information for you, right? So right now I have these four filters. So when I'm critically listening to, say someone's when I'm recording something, I'm listening to these four things, okay? Loudness, pitch, duration, and the tonal content of it. So when I'm working with bands, when I'm recording, or when I'm writing the song, when I'm composing, these are things that I specifically keep in mind. I'm running every part of the song through these four. It's like these Instagram filters, you just run it through them, see what comes out. Okay, what's happening? So any sound will have these four characteristics, right? And that's a way. So it's like, okay, I'm happy with the loudness, but the tone can change a bit. Okay, probably open up the filters on a sense or something like that, you know? So these are important filters, and not just for the micro, which I've written as note, beat, and sound effects, but also in the macro sense. Your song has an overall like a loudness profile, right? It starts slow and it opens up. So if you listen to "Smells Like Teen Spirit," you guys know that song, right? It starts slow and then it's opens up, closes down, and opens up in volume. That's the profile of a song. So that section of the song or entire song also will have a loudness. The way the loudness moves up and down. It also has the duration, which is the rhythmic thing. That's where the rhythm comes in. That's the rhythm of the song. The time aspect of it. The frequency and pitch, the notes. That's the music part of it. That's the actual music theory part of it. And the tone and texture. Because when you listen to bands, right? When you listen to bands, they kind of have this own signature sound. You know what I mean? I'm saying. So If you take, say, Nirvana, for example, they have a certain sound, right? If you take Adele, for example, she has a certain sound. That's the aesthetics of it, and a lot of it comes from the timbre, the tone, the textures that are used. Okay, now we get to the interesting part here. So, what are the 3 elements of music? You guys know the 3 important elements of music? What makes up music? What are the 3 most important things in music? Fantastic. Okay. Start with. Okay. Can somebody define what melody is? What is melody? Sorry? Okay. Anything else? Okay. What else? Okay. Anything else?
The focal point of the song.
Okay. Anything else? Yeah. So that definition of the monophonic notes, because poem melody has always been like single notes played in sequence. That's pretty much it. That's the end of the story. Whether it sounds good or bad, it is a whole different other issue, right? So melody is basically just single notes played in a sequence. Okay. So what's rhythm? What's rhythm?
The pattern provides groove. Wouldn't be like a baseline.
Okay. BPM. Part of the tempo thing, but part of the rhythm thing. But anything else? What else? What about if it's not?
Grooves.
Sorry?
Grooves.
Okay, what if it's not groovy? Does it have to be groovy?
Rhythm actually decides the time signature.
The pace in which the song
So it defines space and time.
Define space and time. Okay. Okay, that's cool. Okay. So basically, rhythm is how the notes are placed in time. Whether it's rhythmic, arrhythmic, again, that's a whole different issue, right? Because when you listen to classical music, it's not really set to a metronome, right? It's kind of expanding in time and so on, and it's very dynamic that way, right? So for me, rhythm is just again like how the notes are placed in time. That's pretty much it. And all the other stuff like pulse, tempo, time signatures are just secondary ways for us to figure out, to kind of quantize certain things, quantize that time and make sense of it. But it's how notes are placed in time at the most fundamental level. Okay. Okay. So, harmony. What's harmony? Group of notes. What is?
Notes that complement the
Notes that complement. What is any other definition? Sorry?
something that supports the melody.
Okay. What is?
Supports the melody in different intervals.
Okay. So you guys know what chords are. So what are chords?
Tonal information.
Combination of 2 or more notes.
Okay. Okay. See, this is a very crucial thing that you have to figure out. Because a lot of people, when I ask them harmony, they usually relate it to chords, right? Because, or say singing harmony, for example. Right? So that's, you guys have any questions? Okay. Yeah. So a lot of people relate it to chords. Now, when I say chord, it means 2 or more notes played together at the same time. So that's how we all know what, there's a melody and you have a supporting chords underneath, right? Am I right? Okay. Now, there's another definition of harmony, and it's kind of okay. Let me ask you a question. How many instruments can actually play like proper polyphonic chords apart from the guitar and the keyboard family? Leave the guitar family, leave the keyboard family. How many instruments can play like true chords? Cello can't.
Violin.
Harp is part of the keyboard kind of string keyboard family. Violin can't play chords. No, you can't. Not, you can't play like a C major 7 on a violin chord. Huh? No. Handpan. Kalimba, kind of, yeah. What else? No. Do you know when the piano and the guitar was invented? Yeah, so the guitar and piano came around the early 1700s. Okay, so before that it was all pretty much human voices and instruments like violin, things like that. So back in the day, they didn't really have this they didn't have the understanding of this chord thing. And the chord is kind of a very recent kind of thing that happened. Not like so recent, but pretty relatively recent. Right. So back in the day, they had a different definition of harmony. Right? So that's this. It's called counterpoint. Do you know what counterpoint is? Have you guys heard of counterpoint? Okay. Now this is one of the most important things about production. Is like learning how to think in terms of counterpoints. When I say counterpoint, it means two or more independent melodies played together at the same time. Right? So that's different from a chord. Right? You have two independent melodies. It's not like vocal harmonies where everything is latching onto the same thing. It's different. Right? So let me just play some samples. Oh no. Is there a Wi-Fi here? Hey, you guys have any doubts so far? Any questions?
I have some doubts. You guys are having a very intense discussion. You can share that with us.
Yeah, dude, let's share.
But Vishnu will come to know what that is. Say it's okay. What are you guys doing?
We're talking about phone storage.
Very, very important. Okay, can you just play this? Is it on? Just open up the volume. So this is a classical piece, just listen to this. Sorry. Yeah. So, but they're independent. They're moving independent of each other. So every instrument is actually just playing one note at a time. But these are there's a quartet. It's got two violins, a viola, and a cello, and they're all playing something different, but it's working together cohesively. No one's actually you don't actually hear a chord per se in the song, right? So what the chords actually do is it's a great songwriting tool, right? So it's a fantastic songwriting tool because it's. Do you know what storyboards are? Like, like when you see a story, or let's go to say comics. Everybody has read Tinkle and all that stuff, right? So you guys know what comics are. It's like there's a frame telling you the story. So chords are like that. It tells you the story. It's a general storyboard for what happens. Now, counterpoint is like watching a movie where everything is just moving very fluidly. So you're kind of implying the chords underneath the counterpoint, but not actually hearing the chords. And that's the most beautiful part of production. It's like how do you actually like bring out the flavor of the chord without actually playing the chord? You know what I'm saying? So, so if you listen to like the Beatles, for example, Radiohead, like one of my favorite artists. And pretty much any like really top production, they're all like trying to write these beautiful counterpoints in the music. And counterpoint, it's more of a classical term, but it can be applied even in the modern context, right? So let me just play another song. So I'll show you. So when I talk about counterpoint, I'm also talking about the interaction between the instruments. So you need to create a certain interplay, right? So what I've noticed in like when someone bands, especially when they come, everybody's like just on it, man. This guitarist is playing this chord, keyboardist is playing a full chord, the drummer's going for it, singer's got a lot of reverb. It's just everything's just a mess. So in a way, you're not hearing the guitar part by itself. You're not hearing the vocal. You're not treating these parts as voices. You know what I'm saying? And that's a big problem, because what happens when everything's a mess, right? And then you try to mix it, and you will try some 100 plugins that won't work. It's not the plugins fault. It's just your song is it's screwed up. No plugins are not going to save it. So this is where the arrangement thing comes into play. Without good arrangement, forget mixing it. Your mixing is always going to be like, okay, you just have to make compromises. Your mixing process is just going to be a lot of compromises, basically. That's without good arrangement. So arrange it in a certain way that things just pop out without doing anything, without having to do too much of automations and mixing and all that stuff, without adding like this and that to make things pop out, like saturation and compression. Like record it, make sure that the vocals stick out. There's space for the vocals to stick out, right? So I'll play a song. This is a good example of like modern counterpoint. You guys heard of Radiohead?
Woo!
Awesome.
That's the biggest video fan here.
Oh, you are? Have you heard OK Computer? Obviously. Okay, so this is the song. So the song is called Subterranean Homesick Alien. So it's it's the juice, man. It's juice. Okay, I'll break it down. Okay, so what you heard was, what did you hear? You heard a melody on the guitar, right? And there are some underlying notes that are supporting the melody. But what you heard was a melody. And what stuck in your notes was not the other notes. It's the melody that stuck in your head, right? Those underlying notes are just flavoring it, right? That's a little bit. And you see, he's not playing the entire range of the guitar. He specifically selected like almost like 3 notes, 2 notes, right? So that's the basic thing. He's already creating melodies. The first exposure to the music is a melody, right? And then what happens? It goes down, and then you can hear what happens after that. What all instruments did you observe in that section? Guitars, drums, then?
Kind of bad.
Okay, and then?
Kind of slide guitar.
Kind of sounds.
Okay, what is Radiohead expert? What did you hear?
I have no idea. It's just like a bunch of guitars and effects.
Okay, cool. So there are basically the drums, bass, there's a EP, which is electric piano. So those 2 guitars, right? So that's pretty much here. But I wanted to pay attention to the interaction between the instruments. Okay, so when you listen to so what happens immediately after the first melody dies, right? You hear new melody, da-da-da, you hear that new high guitar melody, right? And then so you hear that, da-da-da, and there's another guitar just complementing by playing just one chord here. You see that? So it's like, da-da-da, it's like interacting with each other. There's interplay going on, right? Let me play a section again. You hear that? How the two guitars interacting, and also when you pay attention to that guitar, that guitar is playing longer notes, and let's look at it texturally, okay? It's not just one guitar. There's things that are moving in that, right? So it's actually like there's a pitch shifter going on into a phaser. That's why it's very dynamic. It's the same. He's kind of playing the same register, almost in the same register, but that effect that he's adding on guitar is just making the song sound very swirly. So that's a very important thing, you know. It's creating not just momentum note-wise, but also texturally. You hear it, and that's why it's sounding very trippy, man. It's like, you know, just moving, right? So you guys understood that? Any questions? Any questions from the back? Hello.
What's your favorite Radiohead album, and why is it Kidding?
Huh? Oh. Got me, man. Kidding and Amnesia, actually.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on. Okay.
Polyphia?
Sorry?
Polyphia. A band called Polyphia?
Of course, yeah.
Well, they are crazy from the point.
Yeah. Pretty cool, man. But I'm gonna take some very basic stuff. Polyphia is like too intense. Math rock. Okay, let's. Now listen to the keyboard, how it's working. Okay. It's like there's an interaction between the two guitars and that Rhodes. I'll show you guys. Can you show my hand? The keyboard is sitting in between, like subtly sitting in between the two guitars, and it's kind of lower in register also. It's not up there. So it's at the bottom. It's just making up for the empty spots. So that's interaction in music. So when you're working with a band, you have to create this beautiful interaction between these instruments, and then it becomes easier for the voice to stick out. So at one point in time, you're actually just paying attention to one melody, right? You're either paying attention to this or certain things. So you have to divert the whole process of production is also to divert the listener's attention to the most important parts, and which is your foreground melodies, like I said. So all the other stuff, like all the reverb and stuff, is just there to enhance that experience. But you should find a way to direct the listener to each important melody. Okay. Now let's move on to the song and see what happens when the vocals come. It's beautiful. Guitars are gone completely. Just keys, voice, drums, and bass. If you notice, the bass is just playing one note.
I keep forgetting the smell of warm summer air. I live in a town where you can't smell a thing. You watch your feet, the cracks in the past.
I want to pay attention to the keyboard here, okay? So just watch what happens when he stops singing. The keyboard always comes up when he stops singing. So that there's space created, right? Vocal stop, the keyboard plays something then. Right?
I keep forgetting the smell of the warm summer air. I live in a town.
See where the guitar came in? It came in the gap, right? It's a fill, but it's beautifully orchestrated because it's actually the last note. The keyboard is playing a descending line, and it's on the last note of the keyboard descending keyboard melody. The guitar comes in because the keyboard is done, but you want to get the listener to pay attention to the next part that's coming.
I live in a town where you can't smell a thing. You watch your feet.
Now, next part, the bass, which has been completely like a good bass player playing. He's like, no, I'm just gonna play some notes now. Okay? And you notice that suddenly the low end, you feel your ears sense this change in low end suddenly.
You can't smell a thing. You watch your feet, the cracks in the pavement.
Another guitar. Great textures.
Aliens hover like in home movies, but the folks back home. All these weird creatures who lock up their spirits, walls themselves, and live for this.
Alright, so I can show you this, some of these things that I've applied in some of my own production. So this is a song which I did for a good friend of mine. So this is more of an R&B kind of a song, soul R&B type. Sorry? Not exactly, but we can look into Silsonic also. Really brilliant production. Right, so see the space? Can you feel the space? A lot of space.
I can't tell you that I want you. I can't tell you that I need you. 'Cause it goes beyond that. Yeah, this goes beyond that.
So the keyboard is playing this repetitive pattern, right? It goes on and on. So it's given out in the starting, and afterwards the listener becomes accustomed to it. Like, you find now the vocals come in, and we know that's supporting it, right? But all the attention is on the lyrics. That's very important because it's important to focus on the content of the song. Okay, next.
I could tell you that
You guys hear a bass guitar?
leave your side, I will not go. But where can I go now? That's away from you. I love you. I love you. I love you.
Can you hear how the bass is creating movement underneath? It's just one chord though. But if I just play bum 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 bum, you guys would have just walked out. So it's got melodies. So the song is full of like different melodies that are going on together at the same time.
I love you. I love you. I love you. Can I ever say your name and make it sound as beautiful as you are?
So this part here, you can hear the interaction between guitars and the bass. Guitars, like my friend played, and then I had to play it. It's a call and response, a question and answer that's happening in music. Right? So just listen
I
to it.
love you. Can I ever say your name and make it sound as beautiful as you are?
bass is not getting into the guitar. Because when his melody is going, the bass is like, it's the last note of the bass is the first note where the guitar starts. And the last note of the guitar is where the bass starts. So it's this, you're creating space. And the song, even though it sounds complicated, it just took me like some 3 hours to mix because I had to do nothing pretty much. Just get all the levels up and pretty much done. Right?
This is your song, sir?
Yeah, I produced and mixed it. It's by a friend of mine, Alexis D'Souza. She's a phenomenal singer-songwriter, so please check her album out. Right. So this is the. So it's. You guys got the general idea of arranging music, right? So you don't need to know some major theory for this stuff. I mean, obviously that'll help later on, but just a common sense approach of creating space, not getting with the other instrument, right? If you're a guitarist, you don't want to keep playing big fat chords all the time, man. It's gonna get into the bass register. You know what I'm saying? Right? It's gonna get into the range of the bass or the upper overtones, and you won't be able to mix it well. So arrangement is very, very important. So it goes into this add section in the end where it's just. So it's going to a section where there are lots of instruments here, but you notice that you start hearing certain things are very, very clear. Like when the keyboard parts, there's a keyboard fill which comes only in a specific place. There's a guitar fill which comes only in a specific place. And when this, and it's a string section part, and the string section goes down when the guitar is playing something over it, right? So it's kind of interacting dynamically, and in terms of frequency also. There's this interplay that's happening throughout. Right? So you heard that, right? How things were like just interacting, and the thing is, thanks, man.
There were some strings, right, in the chorus.
The chorus?
Yeah, the pads and strings came in the chorus. Pads and strings. Inspired and sounds like a violin.
In the chorus or the part that I just played?
The chorus is the part that you just yeah.
Those are strings, yeah.
Yeah. Were those programmed or was it?
Oh, I programmed it note by note, man. So when the strings, I actually sit and draw the automation curve for every, and these were like 5, I think 2 viola, 2 violins, 2 violas, 1 cello, something like that. So it was a 5-piece section, and when I program, I actually draw the performance notes out and everything. So it takes me about like a week or something to do this kind of work. So
I feel it could have been better if it was really recorded.
why don't you fund the next project?
Because there is that portion of the song that I
No. You got to understand that we didn't do it because we don't have money to do these things. It's easy to say that I know it. Trust me, I know real strings what they sound like, but you got to work with reality, man. Sometimes just playing chords, everybody playing chords and just making some messy. And going back to rhythm, which I will also play some time. Okay, so I also this is one of the ways I tend to look at music, which is rhythm. So okay, let me ask you this: you guys have been to gigs, right? Okay, fine. You walk into a gig, there's a band playing Highway to Hell. Okay, you walk in, and what's the first thing that you do? Huh? What's the first thing that you, apart from going to the bar, you hear a band playing Highway to Hell, and what's the first reaction to the music? What do you wait to? Exactly, it's movement, right? Any donkey can move to music to it. It's like so simple, right? Anybody can move to music, you just put music and the head naturally goes like, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's very simple. Why? Because all the person is, the only thing they're absorbing is this timing aspect, right? It's kind of like this, the simplest information that music can give, which is timing, right? Now the chorus is coming up, Highway to Hell. What happens then? Everybody's like, Highway to Hell. Like, okay, everybody can sing that stuff. Great. Why? Because it's easy. Because the melody is basically just single notes in time. That's it. Single notes plus time. Right? That's like the next bit of information that you get. It's not complex. Nobody goes to a gig and says like C major 7. Nobody does that. Because harmony is complex. Harmony is very complex because, like I told you, it involves multiple notes plus time, multiple melodies and all those things. I mean, only these jazz nuts sometimes go, C11 sharp, something. Okay. But like most laymen, they're not really interested in, like, they don't understand the note, they can't pick up or they can't replicate it, right? You ask them to sing out the arpeggio for like, C11 chord, they're not going to replicate it. But you ask them to sing, say, like Baby Shark or something, they'll do it. It's easy, but it's simple. It's single notes plus time. Right? So, for me, I think of melody, harmony, and rhythm as it's like you're feeding information to people. You got it? You're feeding information, right? You're not just like playing a song. People are, it's information that they're processing, right? So you got to keep this in mind. The way I think about this is, so imagine that you have rhythm, melody, and harmony, okay? And for me, all of them, when they add up, they need to be balanced. So the addition of all of them should be balanced for me, at least. So what I mean by that is, if you have a song which has complex melody, right? You want to keep the rhythm simple, you want to keep the harmony simple. Okay? Or if you have a song which has complicated harmony, you want to keep the rhythm simple, you want to keep melody simple. Beatles is one of the best examples of that. It's like the harmony, the chord structures are a little complicated, but the melodies are so simple and the rhythm is pretty like straightforward. Okay, another band which you can think of is Steely Dan, for example. Really complicated harmonies, but the rhythm is quite tight. It's pretty straightforward, right? So you have to compensate. You can't have, say, complicated melody, complicated rhythm, complicated harmony, and then expect the person to absorb that information. That cannot work, man. Right? You guys understand this concept? Right? You don't want to load the listener with too much information. Right? So the more you give them, it kind of gets into this whole like technical music territory. Right? It gets too complicated. And when it goes in technical music territory, it kind of becomes like the number of people listening to it drastically reduces because it's going to be a very niche audience for these things. So, yeah. So you guys know what this kind of curve is? Huh? Okay, it's a normal distribution curve. Basically, it's okay. So I stole this idea from this. Do you know who Susan Rogers is? Though? She is the producer. She was the mixing engineer for Prince. You know Prince is, right? So she's actually the head of psychoacoustics at Berkeley, and you should check out some of her videos on production. Pretty cool. So this is one of the things I stole from her. So, but she gives this whole beautiful thing on. So imagine this was complexity, and that's audience, right? Number of audience, this is complexity. Okay. So at this side you have Baby Shark for kids music, right? It's very simple, the complexity, it's not too complicated, it's really simple, it's accessible, but it's like so simple that only kids like that stuff. Imagine if I play with Baby Shark for like 5 hours here, you guys are not you guys will probably kill me, right? So it's really simple. For kids it's great. On the other side of the spectrum you have Dream Theater and Polyphia and all that stuff. It's very complicated. It's very complicated music. So you see what I'm trying to say? The audience is kind of very niche in both these places. You have a question?
Then we have pop and the
Yeah, most people kind of listen to this part of the music, right? This is why your general like today's pop music is top of the pop charts. right? It's kind of simple, but it's not like so simple that kids can't live, it's not so simple that you treat it like the childish like rhyme or something. Got some essence in it, and this is where I feel like a lot of interesting music lies. Like I would put say Beatles, Radiohead, and stuff to that zone where it's not fully technical. It's interesting. It's got some cool sounds and stuff. So I mean, I like working in that area. It's nice, right? But why I brought this up is when you guys get work from people, right? You have to assess what they want. So I worked on the entire spectrum. Trust me, there's all kinds of music. The last project I did was for some European baby teaching app for kids. And even though I knew a lot of technical things, I can't make the music technical good. I can't give them dream theater kind of sound for baby music. It's not gonna work, right? And also a lot of times, like our ego gets in the way. It's like I have to. Oh, so sorry. Yeah. Next. Analyze and break down what's happening. So this is where your theoretical tools come into play, right? So without these theoretical tools, you won't be able to break down the song, right? You won't know it's in this key. Especially when you listen to like cool music, like Beatles and Radiohead, and it's very, very, very intricate what's happening harmonically, right? So it's like you won't be able to figure out what's going on in the song if you don't have these tools. Or you might just get a bunch of chords and be like, okay, fine. Why did it go to this chord? I don't know why it went to this chord. So, but then if you have these theoretical tools, it can explain a lot of things. Why it goes to this chord, why it goes to that. Or it might tell you that it makes complete. It doesn't make any sense at all. Which means that but that's a very interesting thing. So he's actually broken a rule. So it gives you all these insights into a song. Now test and apply the new information. So basically it's like, so let's say you take a song, you've broken it down, and there's this cool little progression that you like. And what do you do with that? You use it in your song. Simple. You take that idea, you use it in your song. Right? And this is where the creativity stuff comes in. Right? This is the actual part of the music creativity part. It's like, how do you use that idea into your song? That's the actual creativity part. Right? Because, when you steal a car, you don't just steal a car and drive it around. You have to give it a fresh coat of paint, change the license plate, and you know what I'm saying? So, you have to be a little creative with that stuff. So you're not really stealing the music, but you're taking the idea, right? So it's important that you take the idea, but then use it in your own way, and that's what creativity is. What are you bringing to the game? Right? Because we know that that's a technique used by Nirvana, Radiohead, or whatever. How are you using this? What are you doing with this? That's the creative part. Okay. Then what happens after that? You add that, it becomes a part of your vocabulary, and that's how it becomes. It becomes like second nature. It's like there are certain techniques that become very second nature to you, right? And it's like driving a bike. After a while, you get used to it, right? You start using these harmonic tools everywhere. Got it? And how do you practice this? This is the best way to do it, man. It's teaching. You teach. You get better at the stuff by also teaching, by explaining this concept to other people, and that is what's helped me a lot to remember like some really complicated stuff, because I teach almost every day. So it's when you teach, you're also explaining this to a lot of people. So and then you find like holes in the argument that you have, or in the understanding of the music. So make it a point to explain it, to teach people. Teach for free. Do something like that. All right. You guys have any questions? Nothing? Sorry? What do I teach? I teach production bass, whatever. No, but yeah, I mean, music theory, production, I teach bass, guitars, and a lot of audio engineering and sound engineering principles also. Any other questions? Anything else? Nothing? Okay. Okay, so these are some filters that I use. Okay, so now we're kind of zoning into some specific things. Okay, so some of the filters that I use to analyze, say, in production is, so let's take a simple sound, for example. Just take a tom. You know what a tom is, right? A trumpet tom. Okay, so I hit the tom. Okay, it's got a bunch of characteristics. Can you tell me what those characteristics are? Like, what are the different like characteristics of a tom drum? Great. Then anything else? Sorry. Okay. Anything else?
Decreasing pitch.
Decreasing pitch. Great. Then anything else? Sorry? No, just one hit. Just one hit. Sorry? That's a good one. Resonance then?
Prominent in the mid region of the frequency.
Overtones. Okay then.
Its relationship with other tones.
Let's just take one tom for now. I'm bored. I'm just hitting on one tom. Anything else? Okay. Cool. So basically, when I take any sound, for example, it could be a tom. It could be a hi-hat, it could be one single guitar note or one single bass string. So it's got these bunch of characteristics. One is one is loudness, right? The loudness of the tom, right? How hard I'm hitting it, right? The energy, the intensity, all these things. So that's one aspect of it, right? Now, when I say loudness, it doesn't mean like pushing the fader of loudness, right? It means like physically hitting it. That's how much pressure of air that's putting out, right? Because I've seen like a lot of times I've seen it like, people record guitars, but they say it should be soft, so they lower the volumes down in the faders. That's different from playing soft. You understand? It's got different characteristics than playing soft, right? So playing soft and turning the volume down is two different things. So the tom will have some dynamic information, right? The next one, the duration of the envelope, like I said, attack, right? So that's the attack, like how hard, like the initial, you know what attack is, right? You guys know what envelope is. So there's the initial spike in the level. So that's the duration, right? So you guys know what attack, decay, sustain, release is. Okay, fantastic. Okay. Now, frequency and pitch. The tom also has a pitch, right? Do you guys like know how to tune toms and all that? You guys sort of? Okay. So that's something which I do a lot, which is I love tuning trumpets. I chase everybody out and just sit with the trumpet. Kind of meditative in a way, right? It's nice. So the trumpet, even your tom has fundamental note. Even the trumpet has fundamentals and overtones, and it's a little more complicated than a single string because it's a membrane, right? It's a 2D membrane. It's a little more complicated, but it does have a fundamental note. It does have overtones, and then if you put a ring on it, you know what a ring is? Put a ring, it will dampen some of the higher overtones, and depending on your the thickness of the drum head, you might get different different say sequence of overtones. Right? I think it's called Moon Gel. Moon Gel is a brand. Yeah, Moon Gel is a brand, but it's just I usually use paper, man. Cotton now. Yeah, gels work. You gotta place it in specific spots. But then that's more of fine-tuned control of it. I think it depends on so when I work with drums, it's like okay. Sorry. So yeah, the drums. So it depends on what you're trying to record. What you're trying to control. If you want a drum kit, if you want a tom with a lot more sustain, then you don't have to use that. If you want, it's mostly to fill the sustain and to control the overtones. That's what you use. Okay, next, moving on. The tempo, the tone, or the texture, right? So this is where the overtones come in, because the overtones is kind of what defines the tempo, the tone, and the texture. It's actually you guys know what timbre actually is? What is it? Guys, timbre. Sorry?
The way it sounds. Yeah, it defines the instrument. Yeah.
What defines its meaning?
It's like the quality of the song.
See, yeah, so timbre is actually a combination of both the overtones and the envelope. That's what gives you timbre, right? And you know what compressors are, right? Right, so you know what compressors actually do? They are, the main intention of compressors is actually to change the timbre of the instrument, which means the attack and the overtones, right? It's not just about getting the levels right. So that's an added information for you, right? So right now I have these 4 filters that so when I'm critically listening to, like, say someone's when I'm recording something, I'm listening to these 4 things, like loudness, pitch, duration, and the tonal content of it. So when I'm working with bands, when I'm recording, or when I'm writing the song, when I'm composing, these are things that I specifically keep in mind. I'm running every part of the song through these 4. It's like these Instagram filters, you just run it through them and see what comes out. Okay, what's happening? So any sound will have these 4 characteristics, right? And that's a way. So it's like, okay, I'm happy with the loudness, but the tone can change a bit. Okay, probably open up the filters on a synth or something like that. No? So these are important filters, and not just for the micro, which I've written as note, beat, and sound effects, but also in the macro sense. Your song has an overall like a loudness profile, right? It starts slow and it opens up. So if you listen to "Smells Like Teen Spirit," you guys know that song, right? It starts slow and then it's like opens up, closes down, it opens up in volume. That's the profile of the song. So that section of the song or entire song also will have a loudness. The way the loudness moves up and down. It also has the duration, which is the rhythmic thing. That's where the rhythm comes in. That's the rhythm of the song. The time aspect of it. The frequency and pitch, the notes, that's the music part of it. That's the actual music theory part of it. And the tone and texture, because when you listen to bands, right, when you listen to bands, they kind of have this own signature sound. You know what I mean? What I'm saying? So if you take, say, Nirvana, for example, they have a certain sound, right? You take Adele, for example, he has a certain sound. That's the aesthetics of it, and a lot of it comes from the timbres, the tone, the textures that are used. Okay, now we get to the interesting part here. So, what are the 3 elements of music? You guys know the 3 important elements of music? What makes up music? What are the 3 most important things in music? Fantastic. Okay. Start with. Okay. Can somebody define what melody is? What is melody? Sorry? Okay. Anything else? Okay. What else? So back in the day, they didn't really have this they didn't have the understanding of this chord thing. The chord is kind of a very recent kind of thing that happened. Not like so recent, but pretty relatively recent. Right. So back in the day, they had a different definition of harmony. Right. So this is called counterpoint. Do you know what counterpoint is? Have you guys heard of counterpoint? Okay. Now this is one of the most important things about production. Is like learning how to think in terms of counterpoints. When I say counterpoint, it means 2 or more independent melodies played together at the same time. Right? So that's different from a chord. Right? You have 2 independent melodies. They're not. It's not like vocal harmonies where everything is latching onto the same thing. It's different. Right? So let me just play some samples. Novelty and familiarity, right? So imagine that you're playing a song, okay? It's like, okay, and you're introducing things one by one, right? So as you keep increasing the sounds one by one, you tend to forget this, you get used to a certain sound, right? And your mind kind of like, okay, fine, I know what's happening, let me not focus too much on it. Then you have to introduce another song to the listener. Another sound to the listener. So you have to have this balance of maintaining what is there, but also adding something. So as you keep adding the ears, it tend to prioritize that here and there. So that's a method which I use a lot of adding, gradually adding layers to the music. richness and timbre. So if you have say a flute and a trumpet, the trumpet is way more richer, right? It's got a lot more harmonics. So the ears will tend to prioritize the trumpet more than the flute. So if you have a section coming up and you have flute and trumpet, yours will be like, oh, I hear only the trumpet, not the flute. You got it? So, but you can blend it together and all that, but your ears will generally give more importance to the trumpet, right? So, do you understand this concept of how our ears prioritize sounds? Flow and continuity. Now, like I said, we get bored to changes. See, right now, so this is a very important concept, okay? So, imagine, like we're all sitting in this room, it's great. Suddenly this one dog comes and starts barking. What's going to happen? You'll be like, oh, what is this? Right? Because everything was nice and clear, and suddenly something changed. So we tend to respond to changes in sounds more than anything. It's like when you're working at home, you're just working. But if you hear an explosion outside, you're like, oh, what happened? It's like changes in sound. That's how we respond to light also, right? If these lights suddenly become too bright and go back down, they're like, oh, something happened. Changes. So we are programmed to respond to changes. It's part of our evolutionary thing. We need to know when something changes, that something in our environment changes. We have this tendency to look. So music works in the same way. It's like when you're creating, what do I say? Let me get for this. Yeah, moving up and down range. So these are some of the techniques that you can use to create changes, which is you're singing here in this range, and suddenly when you shoot up, it's like, oh, it's changed. It's like your ears suddenly some novelty has come into it, right? Change in speed, right? You might start a song or very slow, or like a slow doom beat or something, and suddenly like, get into a punk beat. Now that creates a change, a sense of novelty. Okay, arrival of new motifs. So when I say motif, it just means a melodic phrase, right? So you're hearing a song, you're set into this thing, you're set with all, then you hear another motif that comes in. It's like, oh, that's changed. Okay, and introducing new timbres basically. It's like, basically you can give different sensations using different textural instruments. Okay, so you can probably get a string going on top. I mean, these are all like basic things pretty much. But the important part of it is to, like, connect all this to the theme of the song, just slowly add in the parts and create. So what you want to do is you want to create flow. You have to create flow. You can't just like add everything in one spot or have the section completely open without any movement. So you need to know how to create this movement which doesn't which keeps the listener engaged with the song. Right? Any questions on this?
But sometimes, like, in certain songs and of like all these niche artists, they keep changing a lot of stuff. Like there's like constant change throughout the song. So why?
Constant change in which kind of music it is?
Yeah, like weird electronic music.
Yeah, tell me which ones.
100 Gex.
Okay.
Stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so they keep like introducing random elements into the song. So why don't they? Why can't we register
because see that's the thing. So which is the rate of change is important.
Okay, yeah.
So what is it like? You can't load everything onto the listener. You have to introduce elements one by one, right? If you overload the listener with information, see, for me, like too much information is as good as no information. It's just jumbled. What's the point? So you need to slowly let them get familiarized with the sound, and then start bringing one thing at a time. So I'll just play a simple little beat of mine that I did. See that? That's simple. Very, very, very simple. We just introduce one layer at a time. So I spend a lot of time making beats. I haven't done beats in a while, but I've released 4 albums as a beat maker because it was more of a technical exercise for me, because making beats is not. It's difficult to have a beat which goes on for more than, like, say, a couple of minutes, but get the listener to just pay attention to this one loop again and again. So I love this. I like music which is like continuous without any changes, because it's harder to make it. It's very, very hard to make music that's the same but it's changing. It's got these little changes. So you can play another one. Thank you. 808 kind of a bass and an acoustic guitar, like a classical guitar sound. But just listen to how it's the same idea for a long time. Okay. We pay attention to the quite repetitive, but you have to bring in these different elements to create some kind of novelty, you know, and it should be so subtle that it's not like really distracting the listener from the main content, but it's just opening it up visibly, right? So that's a very important element of introducing flow. Yeah, like I said, give your listeners time to absorb information. Right, now transitions, you know, like when you listen to music, where I feel like a lot of producers can do better is like this, where it's transitioning from a section to another section. It's so important to create that anticipation of the momentum. So, see, like I said, you have to understand the overall energy of the song, right? So when it's going from slow songs, from a softer to a heavier section, how would you guys generally do it? It's like you play this as a tom roll and then get into it, but try to use some kind of some tools, like, you know, like, so sometimes what I would do is I would play a guitar chord, a heavy guitar chord, sample it, and then reverse it, and then so it feels like it's coming in, and then it leads into the chorus, right? So and along with like a guitar slider, if it's going to a heavier part, you can just start. You can go to a heavy section. So you're creating this. The transitions are so important. So if you actually want to get really good at production, you know, pick apart some artists and study how they transition from one section to another. Instead of just focusing on verse, oh, this beat is cool in verse and beat is cool in the chorus section. It's focus on how it's going from the verse to chorus. It's the transitions are the most important thing. Not see. I'll give you an example. EDM song. It's just going. It's like, you know, it's peaking. Then what happens? There's this boom, bass drum. After that, it's all fine. It's the same thing. So what are you anticipating there? That bass drop is the most important part, not the section before and not the section after. It's that moment that bass drops is a certain point in time where you're like really emotionally connected to it. So the transitions are very, very important. That's what listeners feel, the change in what's happening here and the change in like what's coming. So you guys understand what I'm saying? The changes, like I told you, when the light goes off, you're going to start noticing it. That's what you feel. It's not the verse, not the chorus. It's how the verse goes from how the song goes from the verse to the chorus, right? So these are some of the techniques that you can use, like setting up tension resolution, building gradual build-up by slowly introducing elements. That's what I showed you in the previous song, right? So gradually building up, and then anticipation, which is using some of the elements. So if you know that you're going to heavy section where there's a specific guitar part, you can kind of introduce bits of it in the previous thing. So you're kind of setting up the listener for that information, right? So that's anticipation. And introducing melodies that resolve on the one of the next section. That's a very common trick, which is you can write a part when it's going from verse to chorus, set up some melody where it climbs up, but resolves on the one of the chorus, right? and that kind of creates this continuity again from this part to the next section, right?